Welcome to Inner Moonlight. Tonight we drift quietly into the gentle mystery of forgotten childhood memories. Outside your window, the night folds in on itself like pages of a book you once loved but can no longer recall. You don't need to remember everything. That's the truth. And it's a strange kind of comfort, isn't it? The smell of distant rain on pavement, the soft tap of your fingers on your blanket, the way your breath starts to mirror the slow rhythm of an unseen tide. There are moments in your life you'll never get back, not because they're gone, but because your mind has quietly decided you don't need them. You probably won't survive this night without at least once wondering what you've lost and why. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the stillness of your breath, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Allow the noise to fade, the stillness to bloom, and together, we'll begin. You're walking through the fog of memory now, not the sharp, bright kind, the kind where shadows blur and time folds like soft fabric in a drawer that hasn't been opened in years. You were there once, in the small house, on the cold tile, in your favorite shoes that never quite fit. The echo of your own footsteps through childhood corridors, muffled by years and neurons. Memory isn't a tape. It isn't even a mirror, it's fog. It clings to the moments your mind decides are worth keeping and lets the rest slip away like warm air past your fingertips. You wonder, what was my first memory? And even stranger, what came before it? If you're like most people, you can't remember anything from your earliest 2 or 3 years. Those years, the ones where your brain was most hungry, most open, most full of wonder, are mostly gone. Some call this childhood amnesia. But maybe it's not amnesia at all. Maybe it's mercy. There's a mystery here. Why would the mind, that strange guardian of selfhood, delete the scenes that shaped our first ideas of comfort, fear, love, and confusion? You don't remember your first smile or your first betrayal, or that first moment of awe when the ceiling fan caught the sun just right, but you were there. You felt it. Your body changed because of it. Your nervous system evolved. But your story never kept that page. Is it possible that memory begins not when we first experience something, but when we first understand that we're experiencing it? You begin to drift further, deeper, into that pale in-between world where sensation becomes thought, and thought becomes trace. And even now, some distant part of you is still inside that young body, watching dust particles dance in golden light, listening to the low hum of a refrigerator or the rhythm of someone's voice just beyond the door. The strange part is, we don't forget these things all at once. No, forgetting is slow. It comes in waves, like a tide. It pulls certain things from the shore of our awareness, leaves behind fragments, a smell, a flash of someone's shoes, a laugh you think you've heard before but don't know where. Sometimes a memory isn't even yours. It was planted by a photo, a story, someone else's retelling. You've said, "I remember," so many times you forgot you never actually did. Your brain, soft and malleable, once soaked in experience like sponge in water. But not everything stayed. There's a reason. The human mind is efficient. It's always pruning, always sculpting. Every moment, it decides what to keep and what to let dissolve. And back then, when language was new and your sense of self still forming, there was no anchor. So the wind took it. Imagine a file cabinet where the labels weren't written yet. Pages filed, pages scattered, some never logged at all. But here's a quieter truth. Just because you can't remember doesn't mean it didn't matter. Your story is written in your reactions, your instincts, your preferences. You may not remember the voice that first comforted you, but it trained you to recognize safety. You may not recall the first time you felt fear, but your body carries its blueprint. Memory doesn't ask for your permission. It comes and goes like wind through trees you no longer recognize. You don't need to remember the tree to feel the wind. Somewhere inside you is a library with missing books, pages torn out, sections faded. But the architecture remains, the pattern remains. The rhythm of your earliest days is still playing quietly, a lullaby with no lyrics, just mood. You begin to realize that the mystery of forgetting isn't a flaw. It's a rhythm, a pulse. It's what lets you sleep, what lets you move on. You cannot carry it all. So your mind carries what it can and leaves the rest behind like pebbles on a path you no longer walk. There's peace in that, a soft release, Maybe your first memory was a lie, or a dream, or someone else's echo. Maybe it doesn't matter, because the body remembers, and the feeling remains. And somewhere in the gentle quiet of tonight, you are allowed to let go of what you never knew you lost. Breathe, listen, settle. You're floating now through a quiet hallway, lined with doors you don't quite recognize, but somehow feel drawn to. Each one hums with a soft vibration only you can hear, a gentle pull from the edges of memory. Not sharp, not loud, just the faint weight of something almost remembered. Your mind is a quiet sensor, not in a cold or cruel way, but in the most compassionate sense. It edits your past with kindness, not erasing in fury, but pruning softly. Not everything is gone because it hurt. Sometimes things fade simply because they were too quiet, too steady, too ordinary to stay. You don't remember the first time you were comforted. You don't remember the smell of your first blanket, or the way your body curled into safety after a long day of light and noise. But something in you does. Your nervous system remembers. Your muscles, your skin, your breath, they carry it still. The brain doesn't keep memories like photographs in a box. It doesn't store life frame by frame. It keeps impressions, feelings, shapes, reactions. It lets go of most details so you can hold on to the essence. That's why you might not remember the birthday party, but you remember the feeling of anticipation when the candles were lit. You may forget who gave you the toy, but the texture of its surface still lingers in your fingertips years later. We often worry about forgetting as though it's a flaw. But forgetting is part of the mind's wisdom. Memory is selective because it has to be. You are not meant to carry every moment, every conversation, every minor detail. You are not a record keeper. You are a river, and the river does not hold on to every drop it passes. And so, much of your childhood disappears, not because it wasn't meaningful, but because it did its work. A glance you don't recall shaped how you read trust. A tone of voice long lost taught you what disappointment feels like. These early lessons didn't need to stay on the surface. They embedded deeper. You carry the results, even when the source fades. Some memories vanished because there were no words for them at the time. You were too young to name what you felt, and the brain stores best what it can label. But emotion without language becomes sensation. It stays in the body. That's why you flinch at certain voices, relax in certain spaces, cry at things you can't explain. The memory isn't gone. It's just changed form. You may wonder why entire years blur together, why some school days, whole friendships, or entire summers vanish into mist, and yet a single toy or a smell or one strange afternoon light remains. This is the mystery of selective remembering. The mind holds on to what has emotional weight or unique context. It lets go of repetition, routine, sameness. You won't remember brushing your teeth at 6 years old, but you might remember the day you saw yourself cry in the mirror. You won't recall every walk to school, but you remember the day it snowed in April. And still, even some powerful moments disappear. Your mind knows when to protect you from the weight of remembering. There is such a thing as forgetting for survival. Some early wounds, some dissonant moments, some unanswered questions, it tucks them away in a soft darkness, not to hide them out of shame, but to keep your present from being overwhelmed. There are also times when memory shifts, not because of trauma, but because of peace. Times of stability leave fewer sharp imprints. Boredom, calm, repetition, these aren't less important, but they form a kind of soft fog over the years. If you cannot recall a certain year of childhood, perhaps it was quiet, perhaps it simply didn't need to be stored. And still, something in you remembers. You remember in the way you love, in the way you walk into rooms, in the way you speak to yourself in silence. These are the echoes of forgotten memories, still shaping you, still present in your gestures and instincts. There is no perfect archive of your life, no master file, no complete record, and that's okay. The moments you need, the ones that defined your story, have stayed, or at least their impressions have. So you can let go of the search. You don't have to dig through the past in frustration. You're not broken for forgetting. You're not incomplete. You're growing forward. Your roots run deep into times you don't remember, but that doesn't make them any less real. And tonight, as you lie here and breathe deeply into the space between memories, you are held, not by the details of what once was, but by the shape of who you became because of them. Let the forgotten pieces rest. Let them fade like fog at sunrise. What remains is enough. There is something dreamlike about the earliest years of life, and perhaps that is because they were, quite literally, dreams without anchors. The world was too large, the language too new, and your sense of time non-existent. You moved through those days with wide eyes and open senses, absorbing everything without yet knowing what anything meant. And now looking back, it is as if those days were made of clouds, soft, shifting, unreachable. You may remember a glimpse, a color, a pattern on a curtain, the feeling of being carried. But most of it is gone, not because it wasn't important, but because your mind hadn't yet developed the tools to store those moments as memory. Before the age of 3, most of us don't form what psychologists call autobiographical memory, the kind of memory that tells a story, that knows who the story is about. Your brain at that age was still under construction. You were forming neurons at lightning speed, connecting new patterns with every hour of experience. But without language, without structure, there was nowhere to place what you were feeling. Imagine a painter with no canvas. The brush moves, the colors swirl, but nothing sticks. This is why early memories are so often described as impressions rather than events. You might not remember the first time someone scared you, but your body still reacts to similar tones of voice. You might not recall the first time you were comforted, but you seek that feeling even now, drawn to the people or places that replicate it. It's not that you forgot. It's that the memory never had a proper name. The mind relies on language to catalog life. Without words, it struggles to record the details. It's like trying to file a document without a label. You can't retrieve it later, even if you know it existed. So those early moments become part of your emotional architecture. But they don't rise to the surface like later memories do. Still, something fascinating happens. As you grow older, sometimes a single image, sound, or scent can lift one of those foggy impressions to the surface. And in that instant, you are transported, not just remembering, but reliving. The room is brighter, your chest feels smaller, the air tastes like something from long ago. You do not know what it is exactly, but you know you've been here before. That is the dreamlike quality of early memory. It returns not as a scene, but as a feeling. Not as a narrative, but as presence. You may have noticed how dreams themselves often resemble childhood memories. Fragmented, illogical, sensory-heavy, but emotionally potent. This is not a coincidence. In both dreams and early childhood, your brain functions without the full framework of logic and self-awareness. You are present, but not always aware of what that presence means. You feel deeply, but cannot always explain why. And yet, in those years, your foundation was formed. Your trust in the world, your relationship to comfort and danger, your instinct about closeness and distance. These were shaped before you had words to describe them. And that shaping never leaves. It simply settles into the ground beneath your awareness, like the bedrock beneath a house. You do not need to recall each stone to know the house is standing. Sometimes people feel sadness when they realize they cannot access those years, as if something has been taken from them. But the truth is gentler than that. Those years were never meant to be remembered the way we recall high school or birthdays or vacations. They were meant to shape the soil, to provide the nutrients for all that would come later. You are not missing anything. You are made of it. There's a kind of peace that comes with accepting the dreamlike nature of early life. You stop chasing ghosts. You stop trying to reconstruct something that was never designed to be reconstructed. And instead, you begin to listen to your current self, the way you respond to touch, to tone, to chaos, to calm. These are echoes of those earliest days, not their stories, but their rhythms. And when you dream now, you may catch glimpses again. A floor pattern, a song on the radio, a hand holding yours. These might be memories surfacing in disguise, slipping past the filters of waking thought. You do not have to remember your early life for it to have shaped you. You are not the archive. You are the result. Let yourself drift deeper tonight into that understanding. Let go of the pressure to remember. Let go of the worry that something has been lost. The foundation is still there, and it has held you all this time. You are here now, and that is enough. Memory is a strange sculptor. It smooths down the edges of some moments and sharpens others to a gleaming point. Strangest of all, The memories that vanish most easily are often the ones that repeated daily. The routine, the familiar, the things you did 100 times and now can't recall even once. You do not remember brushing your teeth as a child, though you surely did. You don't remember every bedtime or what the curtains looked like in the room where you slept. You likely spent more hours in that room than anywhere else, but your mind has let it go. You passed the same hallway every day, ate the same cereal, took the same route to school. Yet those memories are thin now, like ink faded from the page. The brain has its own logic. It chooses to preserve novelty over familiarity. What it has seen many times, it treats as background noise. You only remember the hallway when something unexpected happened there. A fall, a gift, a strange sound in the dark. Otherwise, it becomes a blur, a quiet hum beneath the louder notes of your life. But that doesn't mean the ordinary is meaningless. Quite the opposite. It is often the background that shapes the song. You are formed by repetition, by safety, by rhythm. Even if your memories have dissolved, the patterns they created are still alive. They're in the way you find comfort in routine, in how you react when something disrupts your schedule, in your silent craving for structure or your deep aversion to it. You may not remember sitting at the dinner table every night, but those meals taught you something about connection, about absence, about silence and sound and how people relate to one another over shared space. And now, when you walk into someone else's home, you carry that blueprint with you. It guides your sense of normal without your awareness. Even memories of pain can blur when they were part of routine. A daily scolding, a persistent absence, an ever-present tension. These often vanish into the haze not because they were harmless, but because your mind adapted to them. When the same discomfort repeats again and again, it becomes invisible, a silent rule in the system. And so you grow up with certain instincts, you flinch at certain tones, you find comfort in certain arrangements, you're soothed by order or drawn to chaos. You don't always know why, you can't trace the origin, but you live by it all the same. This is the power of the forgotten familiar. Sometimes, though, a crack appears. You find yourself in a space that feels strangely known. A certain afternoon light hits a wall at just the right angle, and your body reacts before your mind understands. Something old stirs, a muscle memory, a tension, a calm. You are transported, not by thought but by presence. The present moment has tapped a forgotten thread. It's not that you remember, not clearly, but you recognize, and that recognition is profound. It reminds you that the past never truly leaves. It lives in patterns, in the way your eyes scan a room, in the comfort you feel when a place is arranged just right, in the unease that rises from nowhere when something feels subtly off. These echoes of routine are part of your foundation, invisible but deeply influential. You may find yourself remembering small things, not through thought but through behavior. You sit a certain way when you're sad. You hum a tune without knowing where you learned it. You avoid a certain flavor, not out of preference, but from a sense you can't explain. All of this is memory in disguise. Sometimes memory doesn't want to be remembered, it wants to be expressed, and you, in your daily life, are its vessel. So tonight, let yourself reflect not only on what you remember, but on what you repeat. What habits feel like home? What spaces make you feel safe without any clear reason? What smells soothe you? What voices calm or unsettle? These are not accidents. These are not quirks. These are whispers from the faded places, still guiding you. Let the blur of your childhood routine be what it is, a gentle fog that shaped your forest, even if you cannot recall every tree. You do not need clarity to have been changed. You do not need detail to be whole. The everyday things may have faded, but they are still the soil beneath your steps. And tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you can trust that the rhythm of the forgotten is still beating quietly in you, steady and sure. Some memories glow like lanterns in the dark. They rise out of the fog, sharp and certain, even when everything around them has faded, and often those are the ones carved by emotion. Joy so intense it made your body shake, fear that froze you in place, wonder that widened your eyes until the world felt impossibly big. Emotion etches memory. It burns it into the walls of your mind, sometimes gently, sometimes with fire. Think about the first time you felt truly afraid. Maybe it was thunder, or a dog barking too close, or the moment you got lost, just for a second, and the world seemed too big for your small feet. You might not remember the whole story, but you remember the way your stomach dropped, the way the air changed, the way your name sounded when someone called it. That's the body remembering, the brain capturing a flash of feeling because it had something to teach you. Emotion tells the brain this matters. When you felt loved, safe, delighted, those moments were also saved. Sometimes they return in dreams. Sometimes they catch you off guard when a familiar sound reappears. The clinking of dishes, the scratch of a zipper, the soft, rhythmic hum of a fan in a quiet room. You hear it, and suddenly you're not where you thought you were. You've been pulled back into something real, something small and powerful, long forgotten. And just like that, a memory unfolds. You can't always summon them on purpose. They arrive like birds, landing only when the air is still. But when they do, they often carry emotional clarity. You remember the fear or the joy more than the faces. You remember how your heart pounded more than what caused it. The moment becomes feeling, and feeling becomes story. In childhood, emotion was your map. Before logic, before explanation, before language had fully taken hold, you learned through sensation, through the rising and falling of emotional tides. That's why even now, so much of who you are is shaped by feelings you can't quite name. They were carved when you were too young to write them down, and that's okay, because memory, in its deepest form, is not about details, it's about impact. An emotional memory, those feelings from early life, shapes how you respond to everything. The first time someone yelled and you didn't understand why, the first time you laughed so hard you couldn't breathe, the first time someone looked at you with disappointment and you felt small, the first time someone held your hand just because they wanted to. You may not know the dates, the places, even the people, but you know the echoes. They are still inside you. They're the reason certain tones of voice make your shoulders rise. They're why a warm kitchen light in winter can make you feel at peace. They're why some kinds of music make you cry for no reason. Emotional memory never asks permission to surface. It arrives in the middle of a quiet moment, when your guard is down. It arrives in scent, in color, in timing. And when it does, it reminds you of your roots. The parts of you shaped before you knew you were being shaped. You cannot always tell which memories will stay. Sometimes it's the smallest detail that lingers forever. A raindrop on a window during a long car ride, a sticker on a lunchbox, a shadow on the wall that made you feel watched, a smell that made you feel known. What matters is not whether you can explain it. What matters is how it made you feel, and how that feeling shaped the next one, and the one after that. Emotion is the thread memory wraps around. It pulls at the heart more than the mind. That's why certain memories ache, why others warm you, and why many don't make sense at all until you look at them sideways through feeling instead of fact. So as you rest tonight, let yourself feel rather than remember. Let yourself trust the shape of your emotional memory. Even if the images are gone, even if the names have faded, the feeling remains. And that is enough. Breathe into it. Let it move through you. Let it soften. And if a memory does arrive, suddenly, vividly, surprisingly, welcome it like an old friend who doesn't need to explain where they've been. Just let it sit with you. Let it glow a while, then let it go. There's a quiet presence in your mind, always watching, always filtering. You don't notice it, but it's there, like a librarian in a vast, silent archive, deciding which books to shelve and which to tuck away in forgotten corners. This hidden editor within you is memory's gatekeeper. It doesn't just record, it chooses. And its choices are shaped by emotion, meaning, repetition, and sometimes pure instinct. You may think your memories are yours to own, as if you gathered them carefully in a basket and stored them away. But the truth is stranger. You only remember what your brain decides to keep. And it does not always choose based on importance. It chooses based on pattern, based on what fits, based on what felt new or threatening or vital to survival. The rest quietly erased, or maybe not erased, just shelved so deeply that even your most honest effort cannot retrieve it. This editor is not unkind. It is practical, efficient, focused on keeping you stable, functional, and anchored in the present. When the mind senses a moment doesn't offer something vital, something to learn from, react to, or revisit, it lets it go, like sand slipping through your fingers. You can try to catch it, but the more you grip, the faster it falls away. You might find this unsettling, that your past is not fully yours, that pieces of you are missing not because of time or damage, but because they were never written down in the first place. But this, too, is a kind of grace. Memory is not a perfect archive. It is a sculptor, carving your story from raw experience, leaving only what serves the sculpture. And this editor doesn't work alone. It collaborates with your emotions, your beliefs, your needs. Together they form a kind of council. When you experience something, they ask, does this matter? Will this keep us safe? Will it help us next time? If the answer is yes, the memory is shaped, it is given weight. If the answer is no, the experience is often left behind, a brief flicker in the dark. But sometimes, even things that mattered are let go. The mind isn't always accurate. Sometimes it forgets what was most meaningful. Sometimes it hides things that were too much. Sometimes it simply chooses wrong. And still it keeps working. The hidden editor also rewrites. This is the part many don't realize. Your memories are not fixed. Each time you recall a moment, your brain subtly changes it. Adds color, shifts tone, emphasizes one thing, dulls another. Memory is not playback. It is recreation. Each remembering is also a reimagining. You think you remember what someone said, but what you truly remember is your reaction to it. You think you recall a room perfectly, but your brain fills in the gaps with what makes sense now. And over time, the original fades beneath the edited version, and that version becomes your truth. The hidden editor creates coherence. It tells the story in a way that makes sense, even if it's not exactly true. That's why people can share the same experience and recall it entirely differently. Each has their own editor, shaping the narrative to match their understanding of the world. And none of them are lying. They're just remembering honestly, within the boundaries of their brain's internal logic. So what does this mean for you? It means that forgetting is not always loss. It means that remembering is not always fact. It means that your story is alive, not frozen. And that's not a flaw, it's a feature. You are built to adapt. Even your past is shaped to serve your present. You may wonder then, what memories are most real? What moments have survived the edits? Often it's the ones you return to in quiet moments, the ones that feel solid, that resist being rewritten. A certain day, a face in the light, a single phrase someone said to you that echoes through your life like a bell. These memories have been approved by the editor many times. They have passed through the filter and remained intact. They are the landmarks on your inner map, the ones you can trust. But even then, let them be soft. Let them breathe. Let them evolve as you do. Tonight, as you rest, you can thank this part of you, the silent observer, the chooser of memory. It has worked tirelessly to shape your inner world, to help you carry only what was needed, to let go of what would have made life too heavy. Even now, it is sorting, watching, deciding. Let it do its work. Let it be quiet. Let the forgotten remain forgotten, and the remembered stay gently lit. And if, in the softness of sleep, a memory comes to visit, one you haven't seen in years, know that it has passed through the gate for a reason. Let it sit beside you a while. Then, when it's ready, let it return to the silence it came from. There's something deeply unsettling about realizing that not every memory you hold is true, that some were gently shaped by others, and others were never real to begin with. False memories aren't always dramatic. They don't have to be stories about things that never happened. Sometimes they're much quieter. A moment you're sure you remember, but can't place. A person's face that seems familiar, even though you never really knew them. A conversation you swear occurred, but no one else recalls. The truth is, your brain fills in gaps. It wants coherence. It wants stories to have beginnings and endings. So when something's missing, it adds. And the additions are so seamless, so familiar, that you can't distinguish them from what actually happened. You might remember being at a family event that, in reality, you weren't present for. You've heard the story so many times, seen the pictures, imagined the laughter, and somehow your mind absorbed it into your own history. Now when you think of it, you feel like you were there. You remember the smell of the food, the scratch of your sweater, the angle of the sunlight. But those are details your mind borrowed from similar days, similar scenes. It stitched them together and made them yours. And just like that, fiction becomes fact. This is not failure, this is survival. The brain doesn't care about perfect historical accuracy. It cares about emotional resolution. It wants you to feel whole. So it builds bridges between broken pieces of memory. It creates continuity. It gives your past a shape you can live with. Sometimes it invents a conversation with someone who passed away, a last moment that didn't actually happen. But you remember it vividly. You remember the words, the weight of the silence, the parting glance. You might even find comfort in that memory. And whether it's real or not is beside the point. The mind gave it to you because you needed it. False memories also arise when emotions run high. During trauma, during grief, during love. The mind under stress doesn't record like a camera. It captures fragments, and later, during quieter moments, it weaves them together into something coherent. The stitching isn't always accurate, but it's functional, and that functionality becomes your reality. You remember a teacher praising you once in front of the class. That praise shaped your confidence. But maybe it wasn't in front of everyone. Maybe it wasn't even that exact teacher. Maybe it was just a quiet moment, a small gesture that you later magnified. Still, the feeling remains, and the feeling is real. False memory doesn't mean false meaning. You are still shaped by the emotion attached to it. You are still carried by the message it gave you, whether or not the details were precise. This is why memory is more like storytelling than recording. It's not a perfect playback. It's an evolving narrative. And like any story, it changes in the retelling. Sometimes details sharpen, sometimes they soften, and sometimes they appear from nowhere, adding color to a scene you only half remembered before. Children are especially susceptible to this. In early years, the boundary between imagination and reality is paper thin. A dream becomes a memory. A wish becomes a story. And if told enough times, by others or by yourself, it becomes part of your inner world. Not just something you think happened, but something that feels like it shaped you. And maybe it did. Because at the heart of all memory is belief. You believe this is who you are. You believe this is what happened. And your emotions, your behavior, your choices reflect that belief. Even if the details are shaky, even if the memory was born in imagination, this is not a reason for distrust. It's a reason for gentleness. Your past is not a fixed structure. It is a garden, changing with the seasons. Some things grow on their own, others are planted intentionally, and some are carried by the wind, taking root without you realizing it. What matters most is how you tend to them now. You do not have to prove every memory. You do not need evidence. The truth of your emotional landscape is not in the perfection of your recall, but in how your memories make you feel and how you carry them forward. So if there is a moment you remember but doubt, let it be soft. Let it be possible. Let it exist in the in-between space where many of our most powerful stories live. And tonight, if you find yourself questioning what is real and what was imagined, don't panic. You're simply meeting the storyteller within. The one who's been with you since the beginning. The one who sometimes rearranges the pieces not to deceive you, but to help you walk forward. Let that storyteller speak. Let them reshape the past in a way that brings peace, and let the false and true lie side by side, not in conflict, but in quiet companionship. Sometimes memory doesn't come from inside you, it comes from the world around you. A scent, a sound, a place. You walk into a room and something in your body pauses. Not your mind, your body. It feels it before you can explain it. The way the light falls across the floor. The way the window hums when the wind rises, it stirs something. And though you cannot say what, you know you've been here before or somewhere like it. These are the whispers from forgotten rooms. Memory is not always a flash of thought. Sometimes it's a pull in the chest, a stillness in your breath, a sudden warmth or chill without explanation. You return to a house, a school, a sidewalk, and suddenly something invisible brushes past you. You're no longer only in the present. You're walking through layers, present you and child you, overlapping like pages held up to the light. This is the landscape of place-based memory. The mind might forget, but the body remembers the architecture of experience. You sit on a bench in a park you haven't visited since you were small. You don't recall details. But then a bird call, the smell of wet wood, the feel of a breeze that comes in sideways, and suddenly your shoulders drop, your breathing slows. You've returned, even if you don't know exactly to where. Environmental cues awaken memories not through narrative, but through sensation. These spaces act like keys, unlocking doors you forgot were even closed. That crack in the wall, that chip in the tile, that shade of green on the wall of a doctor's office. These are not important things, but your nervous system tagged them once as significant, and the imprint stayed. It is often in returning that we realize how much we've forgotten. You might walk through the hallway of an old school and feel oddly displaced. The floor seems closer, the ceiling too high. You feel smaller, even though you're not. Because your body is recalibrating to a version of you that once saw these walls as enormous. You're remembering with your height, with your posture, with your skin. This can happen even with places that no longer exist, a neighborhood that's changed, a store that's closed. You pass where something used to be, and your heart lurches, not in grief, in recognition. The echo of something you didn't know mattered rises, and you're filled with a strange kind of longing, not to go back, but to honor that a part of you once lived here. Even spaces you've never visited before can feel familiar. A staircase in a hotel, a field at dusk, and you wonder, why does this feel like home? Perhaps it's not the place itself, but the elements within it, things that resemble forgotten spaces. A sensory match, a pattern that triggers the old filing system in your brain. The mind notices repetition, even in fragments. It stitches familiarity from scraps. This is why returning to childhood places can feel both comforting and surreal. Everything is smaller, quieter, less magical, but not less powerful. Because the power was never in the place itself. It was in who you were when you were there. And sometimes all it takes is revisiting those places to awaken something buried. You find yourself remembering something you didn't know you'd forgotten. A smell, a laugh, a moment that was sleeping just beneath the surface, waiting for the right door to open. It's not always dramatic. Often, it's gentle. A realization that you once stood here, barefoot, that you once looked out this window, imagining far-off futures, that you once hid behind this wall, afraid of something that no longer matters. These are sacred echoes. They remind you that you were once someone else, and that person still lives within you, not in memory alone, but in the way you see, hear, feel. In the quiet attachments you can't quite explain, and sometimes you can recreate those forgotten rooms. Not perfectly, but you might stumble across a piece of furniture in a thrift store, a song playing in a cafe, a toy you haven't seen in decades. And for a second, you're not in the present. You're in a room you thought was lost. The beauty of this kind of memory is that it doesn't demand understanding. It only asks you to feel, to let the place speak, to let your breath slow, your shoulders drop, your eyes soften. Let yourself visit these quiet rooms when they call. You don't have to stay. You don't have to name everything. Just pass through. Just listen. And when you leave, something may stay with you. A feeling, a thread, a softness you didn't have before. Because even the forgotten places have a way of shaping you, long after you've moved on. Sometimes your memories aren't yours alone. They've been shaped, softened, or even replaced by the voices of those who raised you. A story told again and again becomes a substitute for your own recollection. A photo you've looked at too many times begins to feel like something you remember, even though you don't. Family, in this way, becomes a kind of architect of your memory, choosing which parts to preserve, which to repeat, and which to leave behind. It might start with a simple sentence. You were always the quiet one. You never liked that toy. You used to be so afraid of water. And maybe you don't remember any of it, but over time, you begin to accept it, not because you recall it yourself, but because it fits, because it's been said often enough to sound like truth. And maybe it is true, or maybe it's a version of truth that someone needed to believe. That's the strange, tender power of shared memory. It doesn't just reflect the past, it builds identity, and it often does so through repetition, until what was once a family anecdote becomes a core part of how you see yourself. But repetition is a sculptor. It smooths away detail. It simplifies nuance. The story becomes shorter, funnier, easier to tell, and eventually you inherit it as yours. You might remember falling off your bike not because you truly do, but because someone told you how funny it looked, how you stood up and declared something brave. And now, that's the version of you you've internalized. Not because of the memory, but because of the story. Sometimes these passed down memories are beautiful. They root you in belonging. They connect you to a time before you had words. They give shape to years that would otherwise be a blur. But other times, they confuse you. You feel a disconnect between what people say happened and what you feel inside. A gap between the version of you others remember and the person you know yourself to be. And that gap can be unsettling. You start to wonder, which version is true? Did I really say that? Did I really feel that way? Or did someone else need me to be that person? It's not about blame. Everyone remembers differently. Your parents, siblings, grandparents, they hold their own versions of you. Versions shaped by their hopes, their fears, their love. And when they share their stories, they're not trying to rewrite your past. They're trying to connect, to offer continuity, to remind you that you were seen even when you can't remember it yourself. But it's okay to question the stories, to notice which ones feel right in your body and which ones feel distant, unfamiliar. It's okay to hold both truths, the one you were told and the one that rises quietly when you're alone. Sometimes you'll rediscover a photo from childhood and not recognize yourself. You'll stare at the smile, the clothes, the setting, and feel like a stranger looking at a life you don't quite remember living. And that's natural, because time has folded so much distance between you and that child that memory can't always bridge the gap. And so you lean on the stories others offer to fill the silence. But here's something gentle to hold on to. Your lack of memory does not make their love any less real, and their stories, even if imperfect, are often an offering, a way of saying, you mattered then, even if you don't remember we do. Still, you have the right to reshape those stories, to decide what fits, to let go of what no longer feels true. Memory is not a fixed inheritance, it's a living relationship, and you get to participate in shaping it. You might begin to tell your own stories now, not just the ones passed down, but the ones that rise on their own, a feeling you can't explain. A moment that never made it into the family albums, but lives quietly in your chest. A private flash of memory that no one else witnessed, but which matters deeply to you. These are the stories you must hold close, because while family stories are shared, some memories belong only to you. They are the ones that never got told, but still shaped your direction. The ones that don't have pictures but left marks on your thoughts, your reactions, your patterns. And maybe one day, you'll tell those stories to someone else, and the cycle will begin again. And someone will carry your version of the past forward, altered slightly by the light through which they view it. That's the nature of memory, shifting, shared, shaped by love and longing and the passage of time. So tonight, let the stories you've inherited rest gently beside the stories you're still discovering. Let them sit together without competition. Let them braid into a soft thread of identity that doesn't need to be exact to be meaningful. Your past is not a fixed object, it's a landscape. And every story, told or untold, adds texture to the ground you walk on. There are memories your mind keeps not by replaying them, but by softening them. Memories that don't rise to the surface with clear detail, but still shape how you move through the world. These are the blurred ones. The ones that feel like mist, that live in your reactions more than your recall. They may be memories of pain, discomfort, confusion, moments your younger self wasn't ready to understand. The protective blur is the mind's way of guarding your sense of safety. This doesn't mean the moment didn't happen. It means your brain, in its quiet wisdom, decided not to give it the sharp edges of clarity. It dulled the image, it dimmed the light, it tucked the moment away in a box marked, "Not now." Sometimes these memories stay buried forever. Other times, they return years later, softened by time, ready to be seen without harm. A phrase someone said, a gesture you once overlooked, a silence you now recognize meant something else. When these moments resurface, they don't always come with pain. Sometimes they arrive with understanding, and other times, they come with nothing more than a quiet shift in how you view yourself. Not all blurred memories are painful. Some were simply overwhelming. Too much noise, too many people, a new place, an emotional intensity your young self couldn't process. So the mind smoothed the edges, gave you the feeling without the image. That's why sometimes you feel an unexplained tightness in your chest when someone raises their voice, or why you shrink away when a room gets too loud. Your body is responding to something your mind cannot name. This is the deeper layer of memory, emotional echoes. They live beneath the surface, shaping how you trust, how you defend, how you connect. You might not remember being teased, but you flinch when laughter sounds a certain way. You might not recall being excluded, but rejection hits you harder than it should. These responses are the shadow of memory, carried in silence. The mind blurs these experiences to protect the child you once were, not to erase but to delay, to give you space to grow strong enough to look back without harm. And when you are ready, sometimes the memory comes into focus, not suddenly, not in full, but slowly, through feelings, through dreams, through pieces that begin to fit together. A conversation triggers something. A photograph stirs something. A familiar situation awakens a forgotten discomfort. And suddenly, the blur begins to clear. This process is not always pleasant, but it can be healing. Because sometimes, understanding what happened allows you to release the fear or confusion you've been carrying without explanation. You realize that the sadness you couldn't place had a source, that the mistrust didn't come from nowhere, that your fear of certain people, tones, or places was not irrational, it was informed. The blur in that case was your mind saying gently, not yet, and now it says quietly, it's okay. Still, there are memories that never return, that remain just out of reach. A smell you can't name, a shape that feels important, a voice that sounds like someone you once knew. These remnants float at the edge of awareness, and perhaps that's where they belong. Not everything needs to be retrieved. Some pieces are meant to stay soft, meant to stay distant. Their work is done. You may never remember exactly what happened, but you will recognize its impact, and that recognition is powerful. It allows you to forgive parts of yourself that reacted strongly to things you couldn't explain. It helps you understand why certain environments unsettle you, why certain compliments feel untrustworthy, why certain silences feel heavy. You begin to connect the reaction with the origin, and even if the origin is blurred, the connection itself is healing. You do not need every detail. You only need enough to move with compassion, for yourself, for the version of you who lived through something confusing and unspoken. The blur was a kindness, a way to let you continue, a way to let you grow up without drowning in what you weren't yet able to name. So tonight, let that softness remain. Let yourself thank your mind for its care, for its filtering, for holding back what it knew would be too much, and for trusting you now with whatever has returned. And if nothing returns, if the blur stays, know that this too is okay. You do not need full clarity to live with depth. You do not need perfect recall to be whole. Let the past be soft where it must be. Let it remain blurred where it needs to be. You have already survived it. Now you are simply learning how to understand it. Long before you could speak, long before you could even form memories with language, your body was already recording. Not facts, not images, but sensations, feelings, tensions, comfort, stress. These were your first memories, held not in the mind, but in the skin, in the breath, in the muscles that carried you through each unfolding day. This is the realm of implicit memory, memory stored in the body. It doesn't speak in words or pictures, it speaks through response, through how you flinch or soften, through the way your heart races when someone stands too close even if they mean no harm, through how you calm when a certain voice speaks low and slow, because somewhere deep inside, that tone once meant safety. The body remembers, even when the mind forgets. You may not remember the moment you were first held, but your body learned what it meant to be cradled. You may not recall the first time you were left alone too long, but your nervous system remembers the ache of absence. These memories live deep beneath conscious thought, and they whisper through your behaviors. You move through life reacting to echoes. You avoid certain smells, not knowing why. You tense up when someone raises a hand, even if they're only reaching for a glass. You feel calm in small spaces or restless in quiet rooms. And you wonder, where does that come from? It comes from the body's long memory. Children do not just learn language, they learn the world through their senses. And those senses, in their early vulnerability, shape the blueprint for adult emotion. If your early years were full of gentle rhythm, softness, touch, then your body still seeks that pattern. If those years were unpredictable, sharp, overwhelming, then the body remains alert, even decades later, bracing for what it once endured. And you may not even notice. You might call it anxiety or instinct or gut feeling. But often it is memory, quiet, unspoken, stored in cells rather than sentences. This is why healing often begins not with understanding, but with safety, with breath, with stillness, with giving the body permission to release what it has held for too long. Sometimes talk can't reach the place where the memory lives, but movement can. Gentle stretching, breath work, rest, being held, being still. These can speak to the parts of you that words cannot touch, and when they do, something begins to soften. You might find yourself crying without knowing why, laughing from a place you forgot existed, feeling a sudden wave of peace while lying in silence, as if something heavy has finally been set down. That's the body releasing memory. That's healing. Not all of what you carry is yours alone. Some of it is inherited, passed down, patterns in posture, reactions to tone, ways of holding tension that mirror a parent, a grandparent. This too is memory, written in muscle, bone, breath. You are not only the product of your own past, you are the continuation of others' stories, held in physical form. But even those stories can be reshaped. You are not bound to relive the discomfort that shaped you. You are allowed to give your body new memories, ones of safety, slowness, ease. A soft blanket, a warm cup in your hands, a room where no one asks you for anything, a space where you can exhale fully, without consequence. These new memories do not erase the old, but they give your nervous system a new rhythm to follow. A calmer beat, a steadier breath, and slowly your body begins to trust again, not just people, not just places, but you. It learns that you will not push it past its limit, that you will listen when it says it's overwhelmed, that you will let it rest when it's tired. This is the gift of awareness. Tonight, notice what your body is saying, in your shoulders, in your jaw, in the way your chest rises and falls. Ask yourself gently, what do I feel when I let go? Where do I hold when I am afraid? No need to fix, just observe. Let your body be a teacher, not a mystery. Let it speak in its own quiet language. And let yourself answer not with thought, but with tenderness, with breath, with the trust that whatever it remembers, you are strong enough to meet it now. You pick up an old object, a toy, a worn-out sweater, a book with frayed corners, and without warning, something stirs. Not a full memory, not a clear moment, just a shift in the air around you, a feeling that sits on your skin like a fog that knows your name. This is how memory moves through the physical world, through things, through objects that once held you. Your childhood is not gone. It lives inside objects you haven't seen in years, in textures that your fingers knew before they could write, in scents that take you back to rooms long since emptied, in sounds so subtle that when they return, you pause, unsure if you've remembered or dreamed them. These echoes live in everyday things. A plastic cup the exact shade of yellow you used when the world felt safe. A certain type of zipper that reminds you of cold mornings and school shoes. The dry rustle of leaves against pavement, the kind that filled your ears when you played outside without knowing the time. You don't carry these memories in your mind. You carry them in reaction. A perfume worn by someone you loved before you understood love. A ringtone that brings tension, not because it's loud, but because it once interrupted something important. The scratch of old wool on your neck, bringing back a coat you hated but wore anyway. These are the sense memories, tactile, fleeting, vivid, and they don't need full stories to affect you. You could walk past an open window, hear a television playing from inside, and suddenly feel 10 years old again. The sound isn't special, but something in the tone, the static, the volume, matches a piece of your past that has stayed hidden. This is how objects become portals. They don't ask for your attention. They wait patiently. And when they reappear, they don't just remind you. They reawaken something that has been sleeping. Sometimes it brings comfort. The softness of a blanket that matches the one from your childhood bed. The sight of handwriting that looks like your grandmother's. The flicker of a candle that mirrors the quiet dinners you had when the power went out and the world seemed smaller, more manageable. Other times, it unsettles. A chipped bowl, a doorbell chime, the sharp scent of disinfectant. You react before you understand. Your body knows before your mind can catch up. Objects remember for us. They collect layers of feeling. They hold vibrations of who we were when we last touched them. And when they return, years, even decades later, They still hum with that version of us, still offer a handshake to the person we used to be. That's why it's hard to throw some things away. It's not about the object, it's about the part of yourself it anchors, the memory it carries, even if you don't know exactly what that memory is, the moment that returns every time your hand brushes against it, a wave you can't name but feel just the same. And it's not just physical objects. Songs do this. They are among the most powerful carriers of emotional time. A few notes are enough, a chord, a lyric, and suddenly the room bends. You are somewhere else, someone else. Feeling something again you thought you'd outgrown. Even food does this. A single bite of something simple, toast with butter, warm rice, cold milk, can transport you into a forgotten kitchen, back to a chair too tall, a table too wide. You're not remembering a meal, you're remembering a feeling, of being cared for, of being seen, of being small in a world that made sense just for a moment. Let yourself notice these echoes when they come. You don't have to hold on to them. You don't have to dig for the full story, just let them pass through. Let them remind you that your life has been textured, that your memories are more than facts, they are impressions, stored not in words but in layers of sensation. And when you find something, a toy, a photo, a piece of fabric, that makes you stop, pay attention. Ask yourself gently, who was I when I last touched this? What was I learning? What did I feel? You may not get an answer, that's all right. The feeling is enough. The object has done its job. It has opened a small door. Let it close again if it wants to. Or let it stay open, just a crack while you breathe. Your story is not gone. It's written in places your mind doesn't always go, but your senses know the path, and sometimes it's the smallest thing that brings you home. There's a curious quiet that surrounds certain years of your childhood, as if they were written in invisible ink. You try to look back, to trace the outlines, but there's nothing to grab. No clear memories, just a vague sense of having existed. These years, often between the ages of 6 and 11, tend to vanish more easily than others, not because they didn't matter, but because of how the mind chooses to store them. This is the vanishing middle. Your early childhood has emotion, novelty, chaos. Your teenage years are marked by identity, by firsts, by rebellion, by change. But the middle years, those calm stretches of ordinary days, often pass without the brain tagging them as memorable. There is a rhythm to that time, a kind of gentle sameness. You woke up, went to school, came home, you played, you ate, you slept, over and over. The days bled into each other. The mind, seeking contrast, lets go of what repeats. You may remember fragments. The smell of a classroom, the way the hallway echoed when the bell rang, a game you always played with friends. But the narrative, the full picture, is often missing. You remember 3rd grade, but not the year. You recall the desk, but not who sat beside you. These memories float, unattached to a timeline. And yet, those years shaped you profoundly. They were the years where your brain, fully capable of memory, was refining its filters, learning what to keep and what to discard. You were becoming socially aware, learning rules, figuring out where you fit. Your emotions were no longer explosive like in early childhood. They had learned to quiet down, to internalize. But that quiet doesn't mean nothing was happening. It means it was happening underneath. You were absorbing the world differently, processing it more privately. And because the drama of feeling had been dulled, fewer moments made it to the surface. Your brain, always trying to conserve energy, stopped recording every ordinary day. This doesn't mean those years were wasted. They were foundational. You were learning patterns that would shape your future. How to handle boredom, how to navigate friendships, how to perform, how to withdraw. You were becoming a version of yourself you would carry forward, even if you can't recall how it happened. Sometimes this lack of memory makes people uneasy. They say, I can't remember anything between 2nd and 6th grade. Or, I have no memories from when I was 8 or 9. And it makes them feel like something must be wrong. But it isn't wrong. It's common. It's how the brain works when faced with repetition and stability. The vanishing middle is a sign that you had space, that life wasn't all sharp edges or blazing lights, that you had seasons of quiet growth, of unnoticed change. And sometimes, memory from that time returns through strange channels. You hear a song you didn't know you knew, and suddenly you're back in a car with windows down, singing along with a voice you don't recognize as your own. You walk past a playground and your body remembers how to climb before your mind does. A certain type of paper, the smell of a crayon box, a sound of sneakers on tile, and the silence breaks. But still, these memories are softer. They don't announce themselves, they visit gently. It may also be true that these years were when your internal world began to deepen. You may not remember the outer events, but you were thinking more, wondering more, comparing more. Your thoughts started looping, your sense of self began layering, and that complexity didn't always leave room for clear snapshots. Instead, it left impressions, themes, tendencies. You became someone who hesitates, or someone who always volunteers first, someone who needs order, someone who hides their tears. These traits began to take root in the middle years, subtly, quietly. So when you say, "I don't remember those years," what you often mean is, "I don't remember what happened." But what happened is you happened. You began building the structure of how you think and feel today. There is beauty in that. And perhaps tonight you can let go of the pressure to remember. Instead, feel. What from those years do you carry in your bones? A certain phrase you always repeated? A fear you still haven't shaken? A habit that formed before you had words for it? These are memories too. They just don't wear names, they wear presence. So let the vanishing middle be what it is. Not a void, but a soft stretch of earth beneath your roots. It supported you, it fed you, even if you never looked down to notice. And maybe if you're quiet now, you'll hear it speaking. Not in stories, but in steadiness, in stillness. It never truly disappeared. It just learned to whisper instead of shout. You stare at a photograph of yourself as a child and feel an odd disconnect. That face, those eyes, that pose, it's you, clearly, but also someone else entirely. A stranger wearing your bones. A version of you who once looked out into the world with a gaze untouched by time, by choices, by all that came after. This is the uncanny experience of seeing your own childhood self and not quite remembering what it felt like to be them. The stranger in the photo. You study the image, searching for context. Maybe it's a birthday, a holiday, a random afternoon caught by someone's camera. You try to remember what happened that day, what you were thinking, who you were becoming. But nothing comes. Not a single moment. Just the shape of your face, frozen in time. This feeling isn't uncommon. It's a quiet, unsettling part of growing up. To realize that some versions of yourself have drifted so far from you that they no longer feel familiar. That child, standing in a sandbox, laughing with a sibling, frowning at the sun, who were they? What did they love? What did they fear? You know some things. You've been told. You liked dinosaurs. You hated vegetables. You always asked too many questions. These facts form a scaffolding. But the feeling of being that child has long since slipped away. And yet, when you look into the eyes in that photo, something flickers. A recognition not born of memory, but of essence. That child is still inside you, though quieter now. Watching, waiting. Sometimes guiding your choices without your awareness. You may wonder why this distance exists. Why you can't recall something as simple as the photo being taken. It's because memory doesn't preserve moments equally. Posing for a picture wasn't novel. It didn't mark a change or a threat or a reward. So your mind, choosing what to keep, let the image go. But the photo survived, and it became a kind of external memory. One you revisit not to remember an event, but to reconnect with your own evolution. Sometimes this disconnect feels sad, like you've lost someone you should have protected. You see the child's vulnerability, their innocence, and want to reach through time and offer reassurance. You want to say, "It gets better." Or maybe, "I'm sorry." And it's okay to feel that way. The child in the photo didn't know how the story would unfold. They only knew the moment, the texture of the clothes, the sound of the room, the nervousness of being looked at. But you, from here, know the path. You know what came next. You carry all the versions that child would become. And in that way, you are both the photo and the photographer. You may also feel pride. That child endured things, grew through things, made it to this point. The journey is not always easy, but it is marked by resilience. The person you see in the photo was the beginning of something strong. Still, the oddness lingers. The idea that you can look at yourself and feel like you're viewing a stranger. That your own past could be so unreachable. But maybe it isn't meant to be reached. Maybe it's meant to be honored. You don't need to remember the day the photo was taken to let it matter. Let it be a symbol, a reminder that you have lived so many lives already, each one layered inside the next. And sometimes a photo helps you feel something you didn't know you were missing. The softness in your eyes, the way your hands were always fidgeting, the cautious way you leaned into joy. You start to notice patterns that are still with you. You realize that who you were has always been speaking through who you are. So next time you see a childhood photo of yourself, don't rush past it. Let yourself sit with it, not to analyze, not to chase memory, but to acknowledge the depth of your own story. To say, I see you. Even if I don't remember you clearly, you are not forgotten. You are never truly gone. And tonight, as you drift into sleep, that child within you rests too. Not waiting for a memory to return, but simply being, still curious, still feeling, still very much alive in the quiet corners of your being. Let them be close now, not as a ghost, but as a witness. You might not remember your first lie, but it remembers you. Somewhere in your body, there's a subtle flicker left behind from the moment you first chose to withhold truth. Not to deceive, not to harm, but to test the edges of what it meant to be separate. To have a thought no one else could hear. To control the story, even if just for a moment. That first lie you can't recall was a quiet turning point. It marked the beginning of inner life. Before that moment, everything was shared. You cried, someone came, you laughed, someone laughed with you. But at some point you realized something extraordinary. You could shape reality with words. You could say something that didn't match what you felt or saw, and the world might still believe you. It was a small act of rebellion, a test, a question wrapped in speech. What happens if I say this instead? And so you said the toy broke on its own, or that you didn't eat the cookie, or that the noise wasn't you. And when no disaster followed, perhaps even when the lie worked, your world shifted. You had discovered personal power, and with it, the complex terrain of moral awareness. Children don't lie because they're bad. They lie because they're learning about boundaries, about consequences, about the difference between internal experience and external truth. A lie is often the first tool a child reaches for when they feel unsafe, unprepared, or overwhelmed. Not to hurt, to hide, to create space between what they feel and what they fear others will do if they knew. You likely don't remember that moment because the brain didn't mark it as dangerous. It marked it as formative. And like many early experiments in identity, it was quietly absorbed. But the emotional imprint remained. As you grew, you learned the cost of certain lies, how guilt can linger, how honesty can be uncomfortable, how even small secrets carry weight over time. And yet, some of your early choices still live within you, not in clear memories, but in the shape of your conscience. You hesitate before answering questions, even simple ones. You feel a tension in your chest when telling someone only part of the truth. You over-explain to avoid sounding dishonest. These reactions may not come from anything recent. They may be echoes of moments you no longer remember. Your sense of right and wrong was not taught in a single moment. It grew like ivy, slowly wrapping around experience, feedback, punishment, reward. And the first moments of testing honesty were part of that growth. Some of those early lies were never discovered. Some were forgiven. Others were punished more than you understood. Each outcome left a mark, shaping how you relate to trust, expression, and vulnerability, even now. You may have also been lied to, a promise broken, a truth withheld, a story told to protect you or to protect someone else. And perhaps you didn't fully understand what happened, but you felt it. The tension, the shift, the way someone's face didn't match their words. You learned to read between the lines, to sense when something felt off, even if you didn't know why. And that ability, the gift of subtle emotional radar, came not only from what was said to you, but from what was left unsaid. The early moral experiments you don't remember weren't just about truth or lies. They were about belonging. You wanted to stay in someone's good graces. You wanted approval, safety, affection. And so you bent the truth to fit inside the container you were offered. That shaping still shows up, in the way you soften your words, in the way you pause before speaking, in the way you instinctively protect yourself with silence or deflection. It's not deception, it's history. And tonight, as you think of all the moments that shaped your integrity, the ones you recall and the ones you've long forgotten, know this: You don't need perfect memory to grow with awareness. You only need reflection. You can't remember the first time you crossed a line, but you can choose how you live with it. You can forgive the child who didn't know what to say, who wanted to be seen and safe and loved. That child lives within you still, not as a liar, but as a learner. So let them rest. Let your past moral experiments soften. Let your mistakes be teachers, not anchors. Let the parts of you that once distorted the truth feel compassion, not judgment. And as you fall asleep tonight, breathe into that space, the one where honesty begins, not with words, but with safety. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole. Sometimes a memory returns not through your own recollection, but through someone else's words. A person from your past tells a story and names you in it. You hear what you said, how you looked, what you did, and it all sounds familiar yet distant. You don't remember it happening, not clearly, but as they speak, something inside you begins to believe it, or feel it, or quietly shape itself around it. This is the memory that remembers you. Other people carry pieces of your story that you forgot or never noticed. A friend remembers your courage. A sibling remembers your silence. A teacher recalls the time you stayed behind to help clean up when no one asked you to. You hear these things and think, was that me? It was. And it wasn't. Because memory, even when shared, is always filtered through emotion, through the perspective of the person holding it. But that doesn't make it any less meaningful. In fact, it can be even more powerful, because it allows you to meet yourself through someone else's eyes. It gives you a chance to witness how you've existed in the world beyond your own limited view. And sometimes, what you hear surprises you. Someone remembers your kindness at a time when you felt invisible. Someone recalls how you made them laugh, even though you were carrying grief. Someone reminds you of a day that meant nothing to you, but everything to them. And in those moments, you begin to understand that memory is relational. You are remembered not only for what you experienced, but for how you made others feel. Your story does not exist in isolation. It lives in the minds and hearts of the people whose paths you've crossed, often without knowing the mark you left. This can be comforting. You mattered, even when you didn't realize it. Your presence was noted, your actions observed. You shaped moments that others still carry, even when they slipped quietly from your own memory. But it can also be unsettling. Sometimes the memory someone holds of you doesn't align with who you thought you were. They remember you as louder, or colder, or more distant than you recall. They hold stories where you were the one who caused the confusion, the hurt, the silence. And suddenly you're faced with a version of yourself you don't recognize. It's tempting to reject it, to defend. But there's another way. You can let these remembered versions sit beside your own. Not to replace your truth, but to widen it. To remind you that every person you've ever been, quiet, unsure, bold, afraid, still exists somewhere in the archive of someone's memory. You are many things, and others can see things in you that you missed. And sometimes someone's memory gives back what you thought you had lost. They recall a moment when you were brave, and you had forgotten how strong you once were. They describe the way you helped them during a time you thought you were helpless. They remind you that even when you were struggling, you were still showing up, still being kind, still making someone feel less alone. You carry those memories forward, not because they prove something, but because they reconnect you with parts of yourself that had faded. You don't need to remember everything alone. You were witnessed, you were held in others' stories, you left echoes in places you never stayed long. This too is memory, and tonight, you can let those borrowed memories be a kind of nourishment. Let them fill in the spaces your mind has cleared. Let them be soft reminders that you are not only the sum of what you recall, you are also the sum of how others have experienced you. Let that bring you comfort. You have existed, fully, even in the moments you no longer carry. You are remembered. You are more than your own memory. And somewhere, someone is thinking of a version of you that helped shape them, and you may never even know. But the mark remains. There are days when memory feels like a trickster. You're sure something happened one way, only to find out later you were wrong. A color was different. The ending changed. Someone else was there. You feel betrayed by your own mind. How could something feel so real, so vivid, and still be false? But this is the nature of memory. It bends, it rearranges. It does not exist as a perfect archive, but as a story always under quiet revision. Your memories are shaped by what happened, yes, but also by how you felt when it happened, how you interpreted it later, what others said about it, and even how you feel about yourself now. The past is not still. It is constantly being edited by the present. This can be disorienting. You might remember someone comforting you during a difficult time, only to discover they weren't there. Or you recall being alone, only to be shown photos proving you were surrounded by people. And in that moment, you begin to question not just that memory, but your entire perception. But don't be alarmed. This is not a failure of the mind. It is a feature of being human. Your brain doesn't record facts like a machine. It records impressions, fragments, feelings wrapped in moments. It stores what matters most, not always what is most accurate, but what felt most meaningful at the time. And if your understanding of the moment changes later, your memory may change too. You revisit a conversation years later and suddenly hear something different. Not because the words changed, but because you did. Maturity rewrites tone, healing rewrites intent. Experience fills in blanks that once felt like wounds. In this way, memory is not static, it's fluid. And while that might make it less reliable in a courtroom, it makes it more honest in the heart. Because the heart doesn't care about facts, it cares about meaning, about the way something lived inside you. And sometimes those meanings shift as you grow. Think of the moments you once saw as failures and now see as turning points. Think of the people you once believed had harmed you and now you see them as hurting too. Think of the moments you thought you were small and now recognize as moments of quiet resilience. This isn't distortion, it's integration. Your mind is always trying to make sense of your story, to give it a shape that feels livable. Sometimes that means adjusting the past, not in denial, but in deeper understanding. And still there's value in anchoring yourself, in journaling, in photos, in honest conversations that help you remember with more perspective. Not to find a single truth, but to witness the evolution of your inner landscape. Memory isn't the past. It's the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. Sometimes you'll walk that bridge and find a different path than you remember taking. That's okay. Let that be part of the journey. Let the landscape shift. You're still walking forward. And if tonight you're questioning a memory, if you feel it slipping or changing or contradicting what you thought was true, pause. Ask yourself, not what happened, but what stayed. What lesson lingered? What emotion clings to the edges? What do you carry, even if you can't name the exact weight? These are your true memories, the ones held in your hands when the rest has crumbled away. You are not unreliable. You are adaptive. You are not forgetful. You are layered. Your story is not broken by revision. It is deepened by it. So rest now, not in certainty, but in the warmth of knowing that even if your memory changes, your truth is still alive, still unfolding, still enough. Memory doesn't always arrive as a complete picture. Sometimes it comes as a question, a lingering curiosity, a sense that something happened, something important, but you can't quite see it. You feel around in the dark for edges, for clues, for some sensation that will name it. But it slips away, a shadow that never solidifies, a voice you almost remember. This is the memory that hides just beyond the light. It doesn't haunt you exactly. It teases. It waits. It returns when you least expect it, during a long walk, in a half-forgotten dream, in the lull between waking and sleep. A flash, a word, a face, gone again. You wonder why it's hiding. Maybe it's not ready, or maybe you're not. Memory, after all, is a collaboration. Between time, between self, between safety. Your mind withholds when it needs to. It stores experiences behind emotional locks, not to erase, but to protect. To wait for the day you're strong enough to see them clearly. Some memories ask to be earned. They don't unfold just because you chase them. They open slowly, like old drawers creaking under the weight of what they hold. You pull gently, and sometimes the drawer gives. Other times it resists. That's okay. You don't have to force it open. Instead, listen. What emotions surface when you think of that time? Not facts, feelings. Do you feel tension, guilt, shame, confusion? Those emotions are breadcrumbs. They lead toward the event or the pattern or the impression your mind marked as too heavy to hold in full. These vague memories often sit near the core of identity. They touch the parts of you that still feel unfinished. Why do I act this way? Why do I fear this? Why do I need that? You don't need to remember everything to find the answer. You only need to trust the direction your feelings point. Sometimes what you're remembering isn't an event, but a shift, a change in how you were treated, a loss of innocence, a new rule you never agreed to but followed anyway. These are not cinematic moments, they're thresholds. You crossed them without ceremony, and now they echo. And still, the mind asks, are we safe enough now to remember? Safety is the key. Your nervous system must feel anchored, your heart must feel supported, your present self must be ready to hold what your past self couldn't. That's when the door begins to open. And if it doesn't, if the memory stays hidden, know this too, you can heal without remembering. You can forgive, grow, shift, and soften without retrieving the full story. The body remembers even when the mind does not. And your healing lives in your breath, in your reactions, in your patterns, whether or not the source is clear. You may feel the urge to dig, to search your past like an archaeologist. That's natural. We want to understand. We want resolution. But sometimes healing is less about discovery and more about permission. To not know, to not explain, to not complete the story, and to still move forward. Let the unanswered questions sit beside you like stones warmed by the sun. You don't have to throw them away. You don't have to pick them up. Just acknowledge their weight. They are part of your landscape. Some memories will return when you least expect it. A scent, a sound, a face. And in that moment, you will know that something long buried has shifted. Then you'll feel it in your chest, in your gut, in your breath. You'll recognize it not by detail, but by sensation. And when that happens, meet it gently. Ask, what do you need from me now? Not every forgotten moment is waiting to hurt you. Some are waiting to be seen with compassion. Some are waiting to let go. Tonight, as you rest, give space to the unremembered. Let them be there quietly. You don't need to open every door. You only need to trust that your mind is wise. That what you carry, seen or unseen, belongs to a whole and healing self. Let yourself drift, not toward answers, but toward softness, toward peace with the unknown. There comes a moment when you stop trying to remember and start learning how to live with what's been forgotten. Not in resignation, but in reverence. Not in silence, but in a new kind of listening. You stop asking what happened and begin asking, who have I become? Because you are not just a collection of memories. You are the result of them, even the missing ones, especially the missing ones. Your instincts, your preferences, your patterns. These are the living proof that your story has been unfolding, even without your full awareness. You do not need to recall every chapter to trust the shape of the story. There is wisdom in letting memory be what it is. Incomplete, imperfect, but still deeply instructive. You begin to notice that the feelings you carry hold more truth than the facts you can name. That a lifelong fear of abandonment might come from a moment you can't recall. That your need for order, or quiet, or reassurance was formed not in a single trauma, but in the quiet repetition of a feeling that was never given words. And now, here you are, with the language you didn't have back then, with the strength that child version of you needed, with the capacity to hold the full weight of what once had to be dropped. This is the moment you begin to rewrite the story, not the events, but the meaning. Not with certainty, but with compassion. You look back on your younger self and stop trying to fix them. You simply sit with them. You offer what no one else could: acknowledgement, gentleness. A hand that doesn't rush to pull them out of the past, but instead offers to walk beside them from here on. You start to accept that not all broken pieces need to be glued back. Some need to be held just as they are. Some need to be honored for surviving the shattering. This is how healing happens, not always through remembering, but through reconnection. You learn to trust your body again, to listen to the way it speaks, even when your mind is quiet. You learn to recognize your own inner signals. When your breath shortens, when your hands clench, when your jaw tightens. These are conversations with memory, happening beneath the surface. And your role is no longer to decode every message. Your role is to be present, to say, I'm here now. Whatever rises, I can meet it. You stop measuring your progress by how much you remember, and start measuring it by how much peace you carry, by how little you judge your younger self, by how often you pause before reacting. by how freely you let softness take the place of control. This is not forgetting. This is maturing. You're becoming the guardian of your own inner child, not the detective of their every move. You're becoming the ground beneath your own past, steady enough to support it, wide enough to let it breathe. And perhaps most beautifully, you begin to understand that you are not alone in this. Everyone is walking around with blank pages in their story. Everyone has years they can't retrieve. Everyone has pieces missing. And everyone has filled those gaps with imagination, with emotion, with silence. It is not a failure. It is a shared human experience. And when you meet someone who's carrying their own hidden memories, you begin to listen differently, with more patience, with more presence. You recognize their unfinished edges and do not flinch, because you've made peace with your own. Tonight, you don't need to remember anything new. You don't need to search. You don't need to push open any doors. You only need to rest in the truth that your story is still unfolding, and that even the forgotten parts have left their light in you. Let that light hold you now. Let it be enough. And now, here we are, on the final stretch of this journey through the quiet folds of memory, through the soft and shapeless places where your past breathes without needing to speak. You've wandered far tonight, not through cities or forests, but through internal landscapes. Faint echoes, fragments, feelings that once lived in full color and now drift like clouds over still water. You don't need to remember everything to know that you have lived deeply. You don't need a perfect archive to feel the weight of all the invisible threads that wove you together. You were shaped not only by what you can name, but also by what your body carried, what your breath absorbed, and what your spirit gently let go. The forgetting wasn't failure. It was design. Because memory is not about collecting every detail. It's about transforming experience into understanding. And sometimes that understanding lives far from words. Sometimes it pulses in silence. You may still wish to remember more, faces, conversations, places you once called home. But what matters is that you're here, still becoming, still gathering wisdom from all that was and wasn't retained. You are not missing pieces. You are mosaic. And tonight, in this quiet space, you are allowed to feel full, even with gaps in your story. You are allowed to trust that your roots are deeper than your recollection, that your soul remembers things your mind does not. That comfort can rise not from clarity, but from stillness. So let yourself soften now. Let all the searching settle. Let the stories you told yourself about what you forgot dissolve into something gentler. You don't need to keep explaining your past to yourself. You don't need to name every emotion. Just rest in the fact that you have survived it all. Not by holding on to every detail, but by moving forward anyway. You did not need to remember to grow. You did not need to recall to love. And the person you've become, kind, aware, curious, is evidence enough that your story unfolded exactly as it needed to. As you breathe in, feel the shape of all that you are. As you breathe out, let go of the pressure to remember perfectly. You are not the memories you've lost. You are the presence that remains. You are the quiet resilience behind every unspoken truth. You are the light that continued even when the path disappeared. So now let the final images fade. Let your thoughts slow. Let your muscles loosen. Let the weight of memory dissolve into the softness of now. You are safe. You are enough. You can rest. And now, all the doors are closed. The windows are still. The memories have spoken in their own language, and whether you've understood every word or simply listened with your heart, it's enough. You've wandered gently through the quiet chambers of your past, and now you are invited to return to the present. Not quickly, not sharply, but slowly, as if rising from deep water, taking your time to breathe. Let your body settle fully into stillness. Let the weight of blankets wrap you like a second skin. No need to carry anything right now. No thoughts to manage. No memories to retrieve. Just the soft, slow rhythm of your breath, rising and falling like the tide against a sleeping shore. If your mind begins to wander again, let it drift. There is no effort needed. No pressure to stay alert. Every part of you is allowed to soften now, to release, to dissolve. The night is holding you, and as you continue to drift, you might feel a sense of quiet pride, not for what you've done, but for how deeply you've stayed with yourself tonight, for how you've listened, for how you've honored the parts of you that rarely get noticed. Let sleep find you like a gentle current, not pulling, just carrying. Let it take you toward the still places where healing happens without noise, without memory, only rest, only breath, only peace. You've done enough, you've always been enough. Sleep well now, sweet dreams.